All right, so what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name's Simon Hill, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary, here with my beautiful wife from Turkey. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, I'm AKDI from Turkey, Simon's wife.
Yep. And this is episode 28 of our movie review series where we cover all different types of films from all across the world. This is the film that we will be talking about today. It's called Origin, a 2023 American film written and directed by Ava DuVernay, who has been making a lot of films, a lot of very important and watched films, sometimes controversial amongst Black folks for some time. But yeah, this is her latest movie. We just finished watching it an hour ago. How did you feel about it, acting?
Honestly, like in general, I liked it. I like the sense of trying to bring like all these different groups together and connect on like one common, ground. I like the overall like just idea of the movie. Yeah, I mean, there were some parts that were like there were plot holes and stuff like that, but in general, I enjoyed watching the movie.
Yeah, the movie has a certain softness and warmth to it. It's definitely a tearjerker because there's so many people that die throughout this movie. So many, very powerful scenes of hate and discrimination that happen to people. Like we see an Indian man dive into a bowl of shit. We see a little black boy get humiliated in front of a whole group of people. It's kind of sad. It's really sad. And there's a certain feel to this movie that makes it feel like a very high end, made for TV movie. But overall, it does get its message across. It is thought provoking. It will challenge you. It will take you to different places. I disagree with some of the points in it, but the story overall is important. The acting is generally good too. That's what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Like it does like teach you a lot, I would say.
Yeah.
At
Even
least
if
for
you're
me.
well read, even if you know a lot about different, times in history or society, you will watch this movie and pick up something new from it. But you will
Mhm.
laugh at certain points too, because like you said, Acty, there's like certain plot holes, certain weird scenes. It has like a certain. I don't know how to describe it when a movie feels like a B movie, but it's like made with like A quality like budget. You get what I'm saying?
Okay. I mean, I guess you call that bad script.
No, it's not the
I don't
it's not
know.
the script is bad. It's just the feel to it, how like certain shots are made or like how certain scenes are done. Like there was a scene in this movie where like the dad tells the little boy, "Okay, it's time to go to bed," and it's like bright outside. It's like 3 p.m. The sun is still
Mhm.
shining. Stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this movie's like strength is its like messages and
Hmm.
not really like the cinematography, though. Like there were some powerful scenes that we saw. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right. So the movie opens up with Trayvon Martin like going to the grocery store. We see him, walking to the gas station, buy Skittles and an Arizona iced tea. He's on the phone, like caked up with his girlfriend, like talking about, yeah, I'm gonna get them panties, yeah.
He was not saying panties.
But he was flirting on the phone heavy. We call
Yeah.
it caking. We call it caking and baking, macking and smacking. Yeah. So he's walking back home, and while he's on the phone with his girl, he's getting followed by this car. And so then he starts running down the alley, and then the scene opens up with this lady giving a speech with all of these guys who are like surrounding this factory that's in Nazi Germany back in like 1920s. They all give a Hail Hitler salute, but then one of the guys has his arm folded and he doesn't do the salute, and he was like the only person in the picture who didn't do the Nazi salute. And this woman is talking about him and explaining that this guy, didn't give that salute because he like fell in love with like a Jewish girl and stuff like that. I skipped over a little bit too because there was a scene with this with the author, the main character who's a black woman. She's at home with her mother who was like dying and stuff like that, and then her
Hmm.
husband comes in who's a white man, and they have like
Isabel and Brett.
yeah, Isabel and Brett. I'm sort of jumping all over the place, but you get the main idea. Like, tell us what you thought about like those first 15 minutes of the movie because I just broke it down.
I mean, like, yeah, we see like the movie sort of jump throughout history a little bit because, yeah, like we see the old Nazi Germany and then like Trayvon and then now today where like the writer is living. And I liked that. I like that it was sort of like doing that time skipping thing and flashbacks and stuff like that. And I don't know, I thought it was interesting. Like her speech was interesting,
Hmm.
um, you know,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was good.
I like movies about black scholars and like intellectuals. So like this movie reminded me of like American fiction. Like that guy in that movie, he's a thinker and a writer and somebody who uses his words to change people's minds and enlighten people. So I like seeing that on film. And I also liked the closeness that she had with her mother, who was obviously like on her last legs in life. I like seeing those bonds on screen. As far as the interracial relationship in this movie, because I know there are some people who don't like this movie because they don't like seeing black women with white men because it triggers them for a lot of reasons. And I'm sympathetic to that because I used to think like that. But it was interesting how, like, in this movie, she writes a lot and talks about, anti-black racism, caste discrimination, and stuff like that. But she still chose to be with a white man. And I think a lot of people who, are heavy thinkers and stuff like that, we have this view, and I'm including myself in that. Like, we have this view of viewing the world in a way where our identity as discriminated people or oppressed people or a part of a people who are oppressed does not limit us from being our full human selves. So we choose to love who we want to love and be where we want to be and live where we want to live without having to constantly remind ourselves, hey, I'm part of an oppressed group, so I need to act a certain way, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I like seeing that, freedom on screen. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that was definitely like a good, I guess. I mean, I'm guessing that this movie was inspired by her real life, so it
Hmm.
was like the facts.
Hmm.
And I also like the fact that they didn't really they didn't make a big deal of them being an interracial couple.
Yeah.
Everybody was getting along. Her family, his family, they all liked each other and loved each other, which
Hmm.
is something that's normal, hopefully. So yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, hopefully. But there is some danger with this interracial couple, though, because I do feel like sometimes there are people who are in interracial relationships, and then because of the sexual access they now have to people who might be of a superior class or whatever, they start acting differently and saying some wild, out of pocket stuff. Like the reason why I get so much hate for having a white wife is because a lot of the times people will assume that I might be a coon, as in somebody who says, "Hey, black people need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Hey, everybody, let's vote for Donald Trump. Hey, everybody, let's hate on black women. Hey, everybody, let's hate on hip hop and black culture and stuff like that." People might assume that might come out of my mouth because of who I'm with, and a lot of times there are a lot of times when there are some black people who do that, which is why some people might give this movie the side eye, and why I gave this movie the side eye a bit about what happens later in the movie. So the lady who's the writer gets approached by like her friend who asked her to write about the Trayvon Martin murder, and he asked her, has she heard the phone call, the 911 call where George Zimmerman was calling, say there's somebody suspicious in the neighborhood, a young black male. The police tell him don't follow him. George Zimmerman follows him anyway and shoots Trayvon Martin in the back. She hears this phone call and almost has a heart attack. And then later in the scene, her husband, her white husband, and her grandmother are all sitting in the living room watching like the Trayvon Martin, Obama talk about Trayvon Martin on TV. And her grandmama starts saying, ain't that a shame? That boy should have knew what to say. When white, being black walking in a white neighborhood is trouble. And then the grandma does the funniest thing. I knew grandma was funny as fuck. She looks at her daughter's white husband and says, "Ain't that right? Ain't white folks scared when black people walk in their neighborhoods?" And then what happened, Acty? What happened? What did he
Like he paused a little bit and then he said, "Yes, I guess, unfortunately," or something
do?
like that.
Oh god, it was kind of funny. For me, that scene was funny because I like when white people are like confronted about racism, and I really, really like like this movie for making white people talk about racism because there's hardly ever movies or television or books where white people actually speak honestly about racism. They always
Mhm.
say, "Well, I don't know," or "Ain't that a shame?" But there's nobody actually admitting that their community has a problem. You get what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
actually like that, but I hate the way it was delivered because up to that point, this guy was macho, manly, but then when he has to talk about racism, he turns quiet as a church mouse, all the bass out of his voice. It was funny. It was funny for me. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was good, and I like that they didn't like. I was sad, like he dies later in the story, but I was sad that I was glad that he wasn't like the limelight of the movie,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. And
Hmm.
yeah, but he was a good guy,
Yeah.
and yeah, he was an ally.
Yeah, he was an ally. He was generally cool. Later in the story, the woman goes to like some cocktail party, and she's met by the guy who wants her to write about Trayvon Martin. And she's like, I haven't really dug into the Trayvon Martin case because why is everything racism, right? For example, back in the days, they prevented black soldiers from being able to buy homes after World War II, even though they had the GI Bill. Or back in the days, black people were forbidden from having wills, so we could not legally pass down our homes and our property and our money to our children and stuff like that. How that's racism, right? Now is Trayvon Martin getting shot in the back racism too? And I wanted to scream at the movie and say, "Yes, bitch, that's racism. Yes, bitch, that's racism." The same way there's systemic sexism, like telling women they can't get an abortion, and then guys saying, "Hey, bitch, come over here and suck my dick." Like that's sexism too. Like, are we serious now? That was one of the most triggering parts, and it was very triggering because her white husband was there, and he was like, "That's my girl." Fighting those blackies talking about racism all the time. You get him, Tiger. And then he smacks her on the booty. I was kind of pissed. I didn't want to yell at the screen because you were with me, and I didn't want to taint the movie for you. And I didn't know where it was going. But God, that triggered me.
They're so funny. Yeah, I mean, I get her in the fact, in a sense that and we talked about this earlier. Like, she may be feeling like the word racism is watered down, and she needs like a more, maybe because also she's sort of like a scientist, like a bit like a sociologist, or at least the books that she writes are about societies, and so that means like she does research and stuff. So maybe she wanted to base that like with a, I don't know, more solid sociological terminology. She wanted to find the big picture. Why is there such thing, or how come it's like this? How come it's permeated with race and things like that? So maybe that was her point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and also like, but I also see like, yes, there are both racism. They are both racism, but just like different kinds. One of them is like explicit, violent, and then the other one is like more systematic, colonial racism, like, or whatever you call it, like Jim Crow racism. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are levels to it, but that doesn't mean they're not the same thing, or they don't come from the same type of hateful feeling.
Exactly, exactly. Matt Villainy jumped into the comments. He said, "Quiet as a church mouse, pissing on cotton." I don't know if you saw the movie Matt Villainy, but when you watch that scene when her husband gets hella quiet, it's one of the funniest scenes because before that, the man is acting hella macho all the time and just very virile, and then here he gets very timid. But I think that's because he was scared of Big Mama. Big Mama was gonna break out that belt if she was like, "Boy, you heard me. You better answer me." She was gonna hit him with a slipper. She was gonna get that iron. That's what I
Wow.
thought. That's what I thought. But back to the part about her and her diagnosis on racism. What isn't racism? Like, I think her as an intellectual and black people in general, we are tired of calling out racism because there is so much to be pointed out. Like a bunch of white folks running in the Capitol trying to kill, the senators because they want their white savior Trump to be back in office. That's racism. Like black people having laws changed today in 2024 where they're trying to make it harder to vote. Yeah, that's racism. Every single month when a black child is shot in the back by the police, that's racism. It gets very tiring. So I can understand why, on one hand, she wants to do that, and to a deeper extent, as a black person who travels and a black person who's very interested in geopolitics and other cultures, societies, nations, and histories, there is a lot to see in other people's lives and histories that relates to us, and we can sympathize with people. But we should never get so caught up in what happened to the Jews or the Dalits or the Palestinians enough to say, yeah, we don't have racism problem. We have a apartheid problem, a caste problem. No, 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 no. We have an anti-black racism problem. That's what we are dealing with. We are living under a system of global white supremacy. But a lot of people, because we think about these ideas so deeply, might get tired of them. You get what I'm saying? I'm sure there's like an allegory somewhere where the philosopher thinks about life so much that he ends up thinking that we're all actually dead. I'm pretty sure that that metaphor exists somewhere, but it escapes me. But you get what I'm saying? Do you follow me?
Yes, I mean, the thing is, like, at one point in the movie, she says something like, if people can relate to each other or have connections with each other, um, they can understand and they can't dehumanize you, which is
Mm-hmm.
what happens with, like, what happened with Jim Crow and all the other, like, discriminated people around the world that she was talking about. So maybe, like, it comes from that. And if you, like, connect to, all the other groups that have suffered from discrimination, and if you relate to them, if you find that connection, you can also solve, like, that global anti-blackness a bit
Mm-hmm.
more. I do think, like, there's a strength that comes from finding similarities, finding common grounds, and then building up on them. I know it's, like, mostly, um ideological and not all the time realistic, because, like you said, you've traveled around the world, and sadly, like, there are, like, even when you go to third world countries, there are racist people and stuff like that, and there is racism still there. But, maybe if you do find those connections and show them to the world, at least some people would change their minds. And, that's something that we need in the world.
Right, absolutely. I agree with you 1000%. 1000%. Moving on in the story, this woman meets up with, her mother takes her to like an old folks home. Her mother is slowly dying. And yeah, she's starting to work on her book. She's talking to like, the publishing company and trying to explain like her new idea for the book. And she's saying it's about, the Jews in Germany and caste in India and stuff like that. And she also starts telling stories about these other people who lived in the past. So she talks about these two black anthropologists who went to go study in Germany and they experienced racism. Then they witnessed the Nazi book burning in public, and then they fled Germany and stuff like that. So she starts telling all these stories and dealing with all of this stuff. And then eventually, like, she's at home one day reading about all of these things, and she comes out of the bathroom, and her husband is dead. And one of the funniest scenes in the movie is when she sees her husband is dead. She screams, but there's no sound of the scream. It just turns into music, and she jumps over the bed and almost like tumbles over. Like, it's hilarious seeing this like 200+ pound black woman like dive headfirst over a queen size mattress, and her like fupa hits the side, and she lands on this white man's ass. It was just hilarious. You and I both laughed. Like,
Yeah,
we got to keep it
that
real.
kind of, like, took off the seriousness of the scene, because, like, he was right there. She didn't need to jump. She could have taken 2 steps and be right next to him, but she jumped. So it
Mhm.
was, like, sort of made it a bit funny and kind of, broke the dramatic theme of the scene.
Yeah, yeah. But what did you think about what happens next, or anything like the different parts with the anthropologist in Germany and the book burning? Like, what did you think about any of that?
I mean, yeah, like, it was, once again, like, jumping throughout the history and, like, showing those stories that we usually don't hear about or know about. I thought that was just, like, really interesting. And once again, it was also, like, interesting to see black faces, like, even at those times, going abroad, being, like, scholars and things like that. That was cool. That was
Yeah.
cool. Who, like, really, like, how else would you know a story of, like, these two black scholars that went to Nazi Germany in the beginning of, like, Nazi Germany?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was sort of like, and also, like, there we had this discussion because there's a guy who later we learned he was Jewish, by the way,
Hmm.
because they
Hmm.
say his name and they were burning his books too. So he tells them, like, go back to your own country, you will be safer. And
Hmm.
Simon was like, will they be safer? Because in their country is, like, segregation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they go back and we see, like, the scene where they meet their white scholars
Hmm.
and together, like, they're trying to write a book
Hmm.
about, like, the racial injustices of the South and the system of, like, segregation in the South and stuff like that. And we see them, like, in front of a cotton field. And I thought that was, like, powerful sort of scene, and
Yeah.
also, like, what you said, it made me think, like, is it safe?
Yeah. Is it safer though? Is it safer to be in Nazi Germany or in Jim Crow South America? It's kind of 50-50. Toss it up. I mean, you could hide in Bavaria maybe. Just get a cabin, wait it out.
Oh God, no. I think it was safer, but it was still bad. It was, like, the best of the worst
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
choices.
Something like that. But I liked the scene after her husband died, and they were in. There was a scene where she's laying down in a pile of leaves and looking on and laying down on her side and looking across. She sees her husband's face, her mother's face, and stuff like that. And she's just having this very sentimental moment where she like breaks down and cries. And also, like, her sister comes to her and holds her while she's in bed, and she says to her sister, "Stay, stay, just stay, just stay." And that was powerful. That touched me. Like, that was real emotion because I've been so sad where I wanted somebody to just hug me and not leave. Like, just stay because I don't want to be
Aw,
alone. You get what I'm saying? That was very
aw.
touching, very powerful. That was probably the most powerful scene for me, other than the Indian shit pool.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that was, like, it's kind of showing us, like, her inside world because she was dealing with grief. And also like they show us shortly after her husband dies, her mother dies too.
Yeah.
And that was her cousin, by the way, not her sister.
Oh,
But
sorry.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that was a powerful scene. And yeah, like at the time when she was, trying to write this piece that was trying to connect the dots and in a way connect, different people who suffer from the same things around the world. She was going through a lot in her
Mhm.
personal life, which is
Yeah.
kind of amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Matt Villainy jumps into the comments. He said, "Haven't heard of the movie till 5 minutes ago. Interesting. I thought this movie was, kind of big. It kind of got a lot of discussion. I thought on like Black Twitter. That's why I picked it. But also, it's like a good Black film that's sort of put in the same discussion as American Fiction. I did a live stream on my channel where I read this piece from the New York Times where they compared the two, and because both of these movies, American Fiction and Origin, are about Black writers, but they're Black writers trying to do totally different things. In American Fiction, the guy is trying to run away from being classified as Black, and in this movie, the author is trying to write why are Black people treated in a certain way. Is it bigger than racism, right? So they're different movies in a certain way, but similar in certain aspects, I would say. Would you agree, Acti?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there are some parts of this movie, like I said, that are very B movie-ish. For example, they have the trope, the stereotype of the sassy Black friend, which is her cousin. So every time there's a scene that's like moving the story forward, there's like a dialogue scene where the main character's on the phone with this sassy Black woman who's like telling her, you know what I would do? I would have told her to zip it. like this, it was funny to see that Black trope happen with the Black main character because usually that's like for white folks. Like Jennifer Lopez will be in some movie in some rom com and like she'll have like a sassy Black character giving her dating advice. So it was just interesting for me to see that. Any comments on that?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I mean, it didn't bother me. Like her cousin didn't really bother me, but yeah, there were some scenes that were sort of like cheesy-ish, very stereotypical, like inspirational movie
Hmm.
scenes. But yeah, I don't know. Like she was not a scholar, but she still could understand what she was telling her in the essence.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There was also a scene where after her mother died and her husband died, she has a leak downstairs in the basement, and the plumber comes and he's wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat. And Loki, I thought they were gonna fuck. I thought that's where the movie was going. I thought when the plumber came down,
That's gross.
and obviously she has a type. So big husky,
Ew.
middle America guy comes down and says, "I heard you need your pipes cleaned." Well, I'm the pipe man. I thought that's where it was going. I really thought that was, but no, she plays the "My mama died" card, and pulls at this man's heartstrings. And that scene kind of went nowhere. It kind of went nowhere. I thought there was going to be more to that, but this guy just had one scene, really,
I
and there
think
was there was no tying of that to any other part of the movie. Go ahead.
in my opinion, I'm going back to like what she said or what I said also. She said like, trying to find those connections between like people makes them more humane to each other and makes them, how can I say this? Like it makes it harder for haters to hate on you if you have common things that you suffer from,
Hmm.
basically. And I think that's what she was doing because he also lost his mother. So she was showing her human side, like her very vulnerable side, emotional side to him, and he related to her.
Hmm.
And then it became harder for him to hate her
Hmm.
because he only had that like superficial hatred for her because she was Black.
Right, right, right. Well, he wasn't like explicitly racist, but the man was wearing a very bold, very bright MAGA hat, right? And there's two ways of looking at that scene, I guess, because once again, that scene happens and then nothing happens with it. When this woman is confronted with remnants of racism or racism in her face, her first reaction is not to question it, challenge it, fight it. Her reaction is to try to understand the person under it, right? Now, if I saw somebody wear a "Make America Great Again" hat and we were around each other for a good amount of time, I would eventually ask, "Hey, buddy, when was America great? Was it in the 1950s, 60s? Was it 1822? Tell me when America was great." And we would have that discussion. But she would rather say, "My father died, my mother died," or "What's your favorite color?" or "Have you read any good books lately?" This is her reaction. And you can look at that positively or negatively. I would say, to each their own, to each their own.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to respond to something like that.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe there are wrong ways, but there's no one right way.
Hmm.
At least, or like there are no wrong ways because each person has their own reasons of why they would react to that in a way they did.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, some people don't have, the tolerance to deal with that. So, and some people like you would want to question their beliefs, but
Hmm.
that might also backfire because
Hmm.
of the already built-in stereotypes that they have about you. And what she
Yeah.
chose to do was like show another side of herself.
Right. Because if you have that conversation with somebody wearing a MAGA hat, they're about to spit out all the crazy talking points. There's nothing you can really get across with them. So, really, bringing that argument to them is really just asking yourself for self flagellation. You're begging to have a bad time. You're not
Yeah,
going to get anything productive done with it. You get what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, definitely.
So moving on from that, the lady then goes and meets up with her publishers, like two white ladies at some dinner party gala again, and she's kind of acting erratic a bit. But I had to check myself while watching the scene and not say, "Oh, this is an erratic woman who is losing her mind because she lost people close to them." Because maybe this is sexist, I don't know, but I do think people in general, but particularly women, do have a tendency to act erratic when parts of their life don't go well or awry. When they go awry, do you get what I'm saying? Like, a woman who just finds out her husband cheated on her is likely more to shave off all of her hair. right? And not saying that men don't do that too, because a man finds out his woman cheated, he might go, burn his house down and kill the kids and the wife. So I'm not saying one or the other is different. People in general, but she was acting kind of strange with these people, like really passionately talking about her book and the Dalits and the Nazis and how it all relates back to what black people go through and Trayvon and my mother and all this sort of stuff. And then she flies to Germany. What did you think about that?
I mean, yeah, I mean that meeting happened right after her, experience with the plumber guy. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe she had pent up, emotions, and maybe she was like feeling a bit, maybe she just didn't want to be with like two white ladies.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, I kind of like don't want to be around white folks right now, or something like that. But then also at the same time, because she lost all those people in her life, she was like really just going at it with her like book and research and things like that. So I think she just wanted to like tell them how important the stuff that she thinks she found.
Mm-hmm.
And the reaction that they gave her was like, oh great, like we know you're going to do something great, you're just so smart.
Mm-hmm.
And not that that's bad, but I think she felt like they didn't really understand her,
Mm-hmm.
or they didn't want to really like develop on her argument, because when
Right.
she was talking to like her black colleague about like Trayvon Martin case and stuff like that, like they were having a argument or a discussion about like race and stuff like that, but they didn't want to do that with her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like once again, maybe this goes back to like we need white people talking about racism and these sort of like constructs, or at least not specifically even white people, but people in power talking about discriminations and injustices that happen to other people.
Yeah, exactly. Like they were sort of like pressuring her just to write a straightforward piece, like racism bad, Trayvon Martin's murder unjust, da 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 da. But it's like, you two are, seem to be smart, successful ladies. Why don't you two white women write it, right? Like we need white people to write these stories and to say those sorts of things, because we've been saying it. Black folks have been saying it, and also at the same time we're saying our story. We speak out for other people's stories too, like this woman does in this whole movie. She goes to Germany and starts, going to all the Nazi monuments, like, or all the Holocaust memorials and the places, and starts talking with people to educate herself about the injustices that happened there and stuff like that. And so, like, yeah, I feel like they were trying to put her in a box a bit, but it was, they were still somewhat encouraging her to expand her work, because I guess her first book was hella successful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, they were publishers, so at the end like their connection was sort of like business.
Hmm.
So maybe that was the reason, I don't know, but I think she just felt like not appreciated or not understood at
Yeah.
that moment, and that's why she was like frantic a little bit.
Right, right, right. So, like I said, she goes to Germany. She has like an eat, pray, love moment, but in this case, it's study, monologue, no montage, study, montage, schnitzel.
Okay.
That was a very bad joke, but I tried to make it work. But she's having like an educational montage where she's like feeling the bricks and stones where, like, Holocaust victims got their heads bashed in or something at. And she eventually sits down with like some German academics, and they're like talking about her book and how she's trying to correlate, what happened to the Jews in Germany and black people in America and the Dalits in India and all this sorts of stuff. And then this white woman starts telling her, your book sounds interesting, but what happened to the Jews is not the same as what happened to American Negroes. The Nazis were trying to exterminate people. They, in America, were just trying to use you for money and stuff like that. There were 6 million verified Jews over a very long period of time. And then she says, it was 240 years of slavery in America. 13 generations of people kept in bondage, millions of people forced into labor and torture and stuff like that. But the white woman continues to like go on and on and on. And this woman is just raging across the table. We can feel it. You can feel the black people don't turn red when we get mad. But if we did, it looked like that. What did you think of that scene?
Yeah, I don't know. She took like German guilt a bit too far here, and yeah, she was like, "What we did, like, or what Germans or Nazis did, was like just pure hate. While like what happens to you or happened to you was, the motive was different. The motive was capitalism. Capitalism happened to you, but hate, and anti-Semitism happened to Jewish people. We just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to scrape them out of the face of the earth, while you were just like, enslaved people were just used for their labor." So I mean, I do get her argument, but it's also like it's kind of like close-minded not to be able to see the connection between the two groups as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, later she finds that out in the story. Like, she's in one of the museums and she finds this picture of like American lawyers and Nazis having a meeting, and she looks at the meeting notes found like in some, I don't know, museum or something, and apparently like they based their Holocaust plans from Jim Crow laws. So she finds out that yeah, actually there is a common root to both of this hatred.
Yeah. I like how in this movie, like they explain why foreign characters are speaking like English, because this movie does change languages when the location changes. We go to Germany, people are actually speaking German. And she goes to India, they are actually speaking the language. I feel like it was filmed on location and it gives this movie a certain authenticness. And the scene where the Germans are speaking about the Jim Crow laws, like you said, at first they're speaking German and there are no subtitles. But then we realize that she has her friend with her who reads German and is translating to her. So then the story comes back and that same scene repeats, but now they're speaking English because we know somebody's translating that. I thought that was brilliant. That I've never seen that done before in a movie. So that was a really, really cool scene for me. Because we were just watching Ferrari and we were like, why are they saying buongiorno? What's up? Like, you get what I'm saying? So this was good to see. I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
and I also like how they explained it, like how they demolished the German lady's argument,
Mhm.
because basically what the Nazis were saying that like in Germany Jewish people do have an economical like base. So we can't like if they have some currency in our country, then just discriminating against them will not going to work, because they will have their own like sections of the town where they will still be okay basically. So they had to like they had to take it a step further and just like kill all of them basically. That's what they were planning. And whereas like in United States, because enslaved people were taken from Africa, they didn't really own anything in America.
Mhm.
So their conditions were different, but where they were coming from were the same.
Mhm.
And that's how like those oppressors took action.
Right, right. Another interesting thing they said in the meeting was that, American laws directly reflect the superiority that the whites feel over the blacks. So the German laws need to reflect how German people naturally feel superior over the Jews because of the anti-Semitism that was rampant during the time, which did kill that lady's argument earlier that what the Nazis wanted to do and the Americans wanted to do was the same. Because honestly, if there was still Jim Crow, it wouldn't be that far off to think that eventually they would want to do a Holocaust against us, right? Like they would eventually want to try to exterminate us. Because to some extent, they did try to do that several times in history. They either tried to forcibly remove us, they paid some black people to go to Haiti, they organized steamboat trips to send black people to Liberia after slavery ended. Many slave owners literally killed their slaves when the Union said that they would be free. And so many other things happened out throughout history that, yeah, Holocaust things have happened to us. And a Holocaust could have been possible under the system of segregation and Jim Crow. So, yeah, what the Nazis were doing was based on America. America has always influenced Germany. When America was hateful, when America was hateful, Germany was hateful. Now America is on the black man's dick. And that's why there are like 20 million mixed kids in Germany.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, also like I feel like America's racism was just like so systematic at the same time, because they had the grounds to do that since like even after like slavery ended, because there was no generational like richness passed down, a generational income passed down or something like that. Yeah, so it was easier if even if they just discriminated against black people, it would be like enough for black people because they didn't have anything because of
Mhm.
slavery.
Right, right, right.
But in
And
Germany, like in case of the Jews, that wasn't enough, so they just went straight forward to the mass killing.
right. So, right after she figures all this stuff out about the Nazis and America and the ties to that, she gets on the phone with her sassy black friend cousin. And the first thing she says is, leave them Jews alone. I love that scene. I love it when she answered the phone and said that, leave them Jews alone. And I was like, yes, girl, please leave them Jews alone. We don't have to talk about other people's struggles and stories when our stories are already so deep. If you really want to talk about how the Germans had a system that was oppressive to a certain people, we could talk about Namibia, how German Namibia was a colony and they exterminated 30,000 black people there. We're talking about Palestine now, but Germany did the same thing to black Namibians at the beginning of the 20th century. And the only reason they couldn't continue is because they lost World War I and lost all their colonies, which the South Africans then picked up because the South Africans took over Namibia and brought apartheid there, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. But we don't have to look at other people's stories to get inspiration and motivation. Anyway, after that, she's still in Germany, and then there's a flashback scene of when she first met her husband. Apparently, her and her husband grew up together in this neighborhood, and they had sort of always been like, in vicinity of each other. One day in front of her house, the woman is having like a repairman chop down a tree, and he, didn't actually follow the orders. So then the white man comes in as like a white savior and says, "Hey, buddy, you better move them tree limbs," or all that sort of stuff. He basically like flexes his white man muscle on her and shows dominance over another man. And then she gets all wet and hot under the collar, and then they form a bond and get married and stuff like that. What did you think about the background of their, relationship and how they met, or the other scene before that?
Okay, you said it so bad though. I
I
mean,
did say it
yes, like
bad.
he did, went over there and saved her from like this, careless racist man. But he was also like, he was woke, and now I don't want to use the term woke because now I feel like it's sort of like um, in a relationship with like just bad stuff. But he was like, he talked to the guy, and then later he turned and he said like, "Did I mansplain? Am I a white savior?" and stuff like that. So I don't know. Like I thought he was okay and funny, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
No, no, no. I don't think woke is a bad word. Like it's only a bad word if you follow those right wing people who say it as a slur or something. But I'm proudly woke, and being woke is a good thing. Much rather be woke than a dumbass racist.
True.
But yeah, I like their relationship. I just wish there was a bit more of him talking about the issues that she wrote about because she seemed to be a writer who did write about race, racism, and what it means to be black and discrimination and stuff like that. So what's his take on that? Because you have a big input on what I write and the content I make, and you're influenced by what I'm putting out there. So I'm sure he was too. But we never hear any of that. They just seem to have this relationship where it's like, hey, you want some pasta? hey, let's look at each other with like sultry eye and have like tension between us, and we're definitely that couple that fucks, right? That's the.
We knew that he was like a social activist because they tell us in his eulogy.
Mhm.
But then also like we know that he was actually like pushing her to write about Trayvon Martin,
Mhm.
like in their discussion in the car and stuff like that. So we see him like being supportive, but yeah, we don't really like see him putting his input into like racism and castes, whatever, like all of those things.
Yeah, yeah, stuff like that, stuff like that. So then afterwards, what happens? Pick up the story.
Oh, okay. Afterwards, yeah. So she is like still in Germany, and she like has this emotional scene in the museums and stuff like that. And then we also are taken back to there's another flashback of the two anthropologists in the South, and they're doing like research. They're I don't know, like they are disguised like the black couple is disguised as the traditionally black people, and they're supposed to be talking like the southerners and stuff like that, but in real life they are like writing these like all these very smart articles and stuff, and they're not allowed to talk with the white couple in public and stuff like that, so we are taken back to them. And then she comes back to the States, and there's like a cookout where she tries to explain like what her ideas are about caste systems, and she believes that once again like there's a connection between the Dalits in India, the Jews in Germany, and the African American people in America. And she explains that to her cousin, and her cousin finds that actually like inspiring. And she says like, you need to like go do what you have to do and tell our stories, and whatever story that you need to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That scene where she talks to her cousin, that was at the most lit black cookout ever. Like they were like doing the perfect electric slide. That trampoline was bopping, like it was hard. Like they were playing all the greatest hits. It was a very lit cookout scene. I got to give it up to this movie. This movie is authentically black. Like there's some real black ass scenes, and that cookout scene was definitely like top notch, perfectly done.
Yeah. I've never been to a cookout, so I can't tell, but I trust your judgment.
All right, all right.
But yeah, go ahead.
No, no. And
Oh.
then after that part of the movie, there's that weird scene where the guy says to his kids like 3 p.m. you got to go to bed, and she's like talking to them about the book. Her friend is a teacher who is recounting one of her experiences of racism and stuff like that, which I think was a powerful scene. How she
Hmm.
talked about when she was a child, the not when she was a child, when she was a teacher, one of the principals said to her like, "I know you're not from around here because we teach our Negroes to not look a white man in the eye," essentially. And so yeah, I was like, okay, you have a woman telling you this powerful story about racism and anti-blackness, but you're still going to write this book saying it's all about caste. We need to drop the word racism and make it about caste. And I was like, what are we really trying to say here? What are we trying to do?
Once again, I think she thought of racism as a tool of, a caste system and a bigger, like, discriminatory system. And race is just like the aspect that they use in the States and also globally, I would say, spread by colonialization. But yeah, that wasn't like she's saying like there's a bigger system that allows racism to happen, and the same system exists in India. It existed in Germany, and I think that's what she's trying to say. She's not denying that like those things were racist in
Mm-hmm.
any means, but she's just trying to find the core, the origin
Mm-hmm.
of the problem.
Right, right, right. We'll talk about that more at the end. Matt Villainy jumps into the comments. He says, "I want schnitzel now." When I guess when he was talking about when I made that horrible joke, but schnitzel was good. I went to Germany and ate some schnitzel. I liked it. Actually, went to Slovenia or Prague or something, and you ate like a huge schnitzel. I don't know.
I went to Munich in
Oh, you went to
Germany.
Munich.
Yeah,
What
yeah, I
happened?
ate at like a very famous schnitzel restaurant. It was really good. It was hella big.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But moving on, in the story now, they're showing that couple, the Black American anthropologist couple who are down south, infiltrated into the South, while the white couple are also infiltrated too, and they're writing a book about what it's like to be black in and white in those communities. And so there's scenes of them like going into the grocery store. The white couple walk in, nobody suspects them of anything. The black girl walks in, and the guy is like the store owner's like side eyeing her and watching her moves. The black guy is walking through town, and even though he's being like deferential to white people, they're like threatening to lynch him and stuff like that. And yeah, the white couple is living on the other side of town in a big house, and the police drive by and they wave. And then the black couple is like, sitting on their front porch. The police drive by and they scowl them. And yeah, I thought that was interesting. That dichotomy. I'm kind of done with the idea of like these movies showing like racism in the South as like just white people scowling at black folks, because I feel like racism is like more passive aggressive. Like, ooh, I'm sorry, but no Negroes in the
Now it
store.
is, but back then it was more explicit.
I feel like even back then, white people were generally like the same. I kind of disagree with this. I,
Okay,
I I think we just believe it because that's how movies have told it. But I feel like back then white folks would have been, "Sorry, boy. I really want to, but you can't sit at the counter." I don't know.
I doubt that they were saying sorry, but I don't know. Like, obviously, you have more like information about this than me, but I just feel like at least now it's not that acceptable, and there's like more passive aggressive racism rather than explicit racism.
Yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
though sometimes, of course, there are explicit racist people.
Right, right, right. So anyway, she's back at home in America, and her cousin, who is the sassy black woman who was usually on the phone, but her cousin is sick too. Like her cousin sort of kind of got sick out of nowhere. I feel like because in the beginning of the movie when we first see her, she's like walking around like cooking, working, lounging at home, chilling, and the next thing you know, she's got like a breathalyzer, and she's slowly dying too. And I'm like, whoa, everybody's gonna die in this movie. Everybody's close to her gonna pass away, and like the main character is packing up to go to India. And you and I, when we heard that she was going to go to Mumbai, we said, yes, this movie's really going to go all the way. And I was happy as hell about that. And so she flies to India, and she is met with all the traffic, the chaotic scenery, the honking of the horns. She makes it to her hotel. She's tired as hell. And so to rest, she opens the window of her Indian hotel and lets all the smog in and the car honking horns and everything like that. Which I was like, why would you do that? Like, and then she looked out on the balcony as if she was looking out like at the Alps or like the Mediterranean, like she was in Barcelona or something. Like, how are you going to relax while you got 20 taxis and tuk-tuks like honking maliciously at each other? You get what I'm saying?
I mean, I don't know. I sometimes enjoy like chaotic streets. It's fun to watch them because there's so many things happening. So you just watch like all these, people going on with their lives and what they are doing and stuff. So maybe
Hmm.
she was feeling like that.
Okay.
I mean, she is like a sociologist in this movie, like just discovering different societies. So maybe she was just observing or something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. But I was like, after a 17-hour flight from Atlanta to Mumbai, the last thing I want to do is like look out at the window and just see.
Yeah, but I remember like my professor at university, and she's like this lady who owns an organization, and she went to a lot of places around the world for like psychoeducational like charity basically, and
Hmm.
like she went to Mali and other places like around Turkey and stuff like that, and she told me like she would never forget the time where she went to India and she was just like almost about to have a panic attack because of how crowded and chaotic it was.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been in crowded places, like going to Africa and being in the tuk-tuks in like the middle of Mombasa or Arusha or Dar es Salaam. Like it gets crazy, right? Like, but
Yeah,
I
I
feel
mean,
like
imagine that, but like 5 times more.
yeah, I can imagine it's 5 times worse. But yeah, Matt Villainy jumps into the comments. He says, "I've been to Munich. Actor, did you enjoy your time in Munich?"
Yeah, I liked it. I think it's not a city that I would live in because for me it was sort of like had the cold and distant feeling, but I think it was like interesting and it's a good place to visit for me
Hmm.
at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like sort of artsy and they had a lot of museums and generally like the city center was nice and they had some like historical buildings and stuff, which I appreciated.
All right, nice, nice. Matt Villainy, tell us about your experience in the comments, or you're more than welcome to jump on and chat with us too. But picking up in the story, so the next day when she wakes up in her hotel in India, she goes down and meets up with her like colleagues, like another Indian professor who actually is a real professor, by the way. he's dressed like he's dressed like the manager for like Playboy Cardi. Like this is the guy you call if you really want Lil Nas X like to do a concert for your bar mitzvah. Like he looks like exactly like a rock star manager, but he's a professor and he's a Dalit in India. But he looks very black as well, which goes to show, like, one thing that's missing maybe in her analysis is that she's forgetting that black people were the original people on the planet. And in every country you go to, the indigenous people are brown skinned, if not flat out black, like the Indians, like the Yemenis, like the Austronesians, like the Melanesians. So many people on the planet, they all come from us, right? So looking at that Dalit man, I was like, oh, that's Jermaine. But anyway, she meets up with him and another professor too, and they're walking through the streets of India, and they find this statue of a man in a cage, and she's like, "Who is that?" And they say that's a Dalit man whose name was like Deparim or something like that. He was,
Ambedkar.
huh?
Ambedkar.
Ambedkar. Ambedkar was a Dalit man, and the Dalits are like the lowest caste in Indian society. They're called the Untouchables. Their only job in life is to like pick up human shit with their hands and clean the sewers and drains. And he ended up becoming like a professor with a PhD from an American university and writing India's constitution. And they keep his statues in cages because many Indians hate him and despise him, of course. And so his statues are always vandalized. So people have to protect his own statues. So then she sits down with these Indian scholars and they break down who this man was, what he stood for, what he tried to advocate for and fight for, and stuff like that. And yeah, that was actually a very, very powerful scene for me too, because number one, she went to India. I like seeing movies where black people travel to far off lands where we're usually not seen. Secondly, they gave space for the Indians to tell their own story, specifically the Dalits and how they're treated, how they want to be treated, and what they want to make their society like. I thought it was very, very, very good. I love that scene. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was very powerful too because most of the time when like India is mentioned in the movies or Dalits are mentioned in the movies, I feel like only their sufferings are shown. But it was nice to see like how they were trying to empower Dalits and how they were trying to like overcome this, with this like organizations and museums and stuff like that, which was really cool. And I don't know, like I also wanted to ask you, like in this talk, the PhD professor Suraj, he says like he makes a comparison between America and the caste system of India. He says like how you guys have blacks, Asians, whites, browns, and just like that we have like the Dalits, and then at the top we have Brahmins and something like that. So what do you think about like that comparison?
I think there are some similarities because you can find similarities in anything. I think the difference, though, with the caste system in India and what we have in America is that our stuff is, I think, not as rigid as the Indian caste system. Because from my understanding, their caste system is based on a religion. And we see this in the movie. Like a man walks into a temple, prays to Ganesh, make me a better person, then walks outside and shits in a Dalit's face. Literally, shits in a Dalit's face, which is crazy. But the same thing happened in America, right? They used the Bible, they used Christianity, they used every religious excuse they could to enslave us and still discriminate against us and forbid interracial marriages and stuff like that. And so I think our system is similar, but not as similar because theirs, I think, is way more serious. And one of the reasons I dislike this movie or dislike the thesis of the woman's book is because comparing what we have in America to the Indian caste system is damn near almost disrespectful because we were able to somewhat eliminate codified, legalized racial discrimination. But the Dalits still cannot change or reform their religion or their social standing in a society that has practiced this for thousands of years. So I think there is a very, very big difference. What the Dalits are going through is horrible, right? And that needs to be changed. And a part of me wishes that India did become a Muslim country, but they never fully converted to Islam, though there are millions of Muslims in India, right? I think like the third or fourth largest amount of Muslims anywhere in the world are in India. And they're a discriminated group in India too. But in Islam, they forbid caste and all of these different, sections. But in Hinduism, this is codified. But that's my opinion. What do you think?
I mean, yes, like you said, I do see the similarities. I don't think it's this. It's I don't really think it's disrespectful to, say that there's a caste in America or in Germany or whatever. Because I mean, I'm sure the term that they use in their country is not caste and it's something else. So it's just like the terminology that is in English. And yes, there are differences within those systems that is in the States and in India. But yeah, and I also think in general, like with their system in India, like all people are Indian, and also they do share like mostly the same history, or at least they've been in that country, like all of their lives and stuff like that, and their origins and their ancestors are also from the same country and stuff. But like not all races in the United States share the same history, and I think maybe that's where the difference is from because brown people and Asians are they were never enslaved by like Americans the way that African people were.
Right, right, right. I think, in America, there is maybe not a shared. Well, I kind of fight back against that idea, maybe that we don't have a shared history because, black people have been in that nation forever and we definitely have a shared history. There are certain groups of other people who came and they have sort of a shared history and identity. But the difference about our country is that our country is based around an ideal, while other nations are based upon an ethnicity or a race or a religion you're supposed to belong to. And that's what makes us different. So we don't need a shared history because the experiment of our nation is that we don't need any of that to be unified, right? We're all Americans as long as you believe these things, and you don't have to be white, black, Asian, whatever, right? But in other places, and it doesn't even matter about your language, religion, none of that, right? But in other places, it's different. As far as India, like we have to remember, like India is a colonial construct. There was no such thing as India as we know it until 1948, when the British partitioned, their colony into Pakistan and India and created these two countries, now three because of Bangladesh. And so there are different parts of India. There are thousands of languages spoken within India. There are many different religions, and Hinduism is not even one big thing. Some people worship different gods. Some people worship in different ways. So I think it's a very complex thing to talk about. Their caste system. Nobody will ever be as informed on it as a real Indian person, especially a Dalit. So I just feel like we can't make that comparison to what they're going through. You follow me? I get we
Okay.
can find similarities, but we can't say it's the same thing.
Yes, I mean that's what she's trying to do though. Like she's trying to find similarities and she's trying to discover the bigger system that oppresses people.
Hmm.
And like I think she does acknowledge the differences.
Right, right, right. Uh, Bless you, by the way. I heard you sneeze in the other room.
Thank you.
But picking up where we left off. So they're telling the story. The Indian scholars are telling the story about their Dalit constitution writer, and he went through a lot. They show him as a kid. He couldn't sit in the desk because the other kids would think it was impure if he touched it. He couldn't drink from the water fountain, so an older man literally had to come and pour water down his mouth as a kid. But he continued to persevere. He went to America, studied, got a PhD. He was living amongst black people in the United States and felt kinship and brotherhood with them. Also, at the same time, when she's telling this story, at different parts of the movie, they bring up this German man who didn't do the Nazi salute, and him and his Jewish girlfriend, and them having like romantic dates and going out dancing and stuff like that, and all the rumors in Germany that people are gonna like start rounding up the Jews, but they don't believe it. So all of that is happening and stuff like that. What did you think about the side quest and the other flashbacks that were happening?
I mean, I really liked, that they were mentioning, and both societies were drawing inspiration from their own like challenges, basically. You know, Martin Luther King came to India. Their guy came to like the United States, and they both saw like these different things, and they both saw the similarities and the sort of like a brotherhood between the two like groups. And also, I really like the part where they just like played Martin Luther King's speech, and where he was saying like, when I came here to India and the president, the I don't know, like someone was introducing him, and they said like, here is the untouchable of the United States, and he was like shocked, that he was introduced that way. But then he thought about it, and then he said like, yes, I am an untouchable in my country because these are the systems that we have to overcome. It's and he found that similarity, which I thought was like, it was like an inspirational part of the movie. And yeah, I mean, about the side quest, once again, it's like this notion of, you can't really choose who you're going to fall in love with, and other stuff will not matter if you
Yeah.
allow yourself to love.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the part where they played MLK's speech was very good too, because there's a line in there where he says America has created its own caste. And I felt like that was one of the biggest mic drops she could have put out there for supporting her theory or new framework for looking at discrimination. And I also liked how this speech was introduced because she didn't know it existed. There was a Indian Dalit woman who was a professor who said, I wrote my thesis on Martin Luther King being in India. And he had an interview in Ebony magazine, which is a very famous black magazine. And the main character is like, wait, Martin Luther King talked about India and ebony, because it's always interesting when you get information about your culture from other people, regardless of where you're from, right? You might learn something from somebody from China, like, boy, you didn't know Tupac met Malcolm X one time? Like, what? For real? Like, what? You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali smoked weed with Snoop Dogg? What? How do you know this, Kazakhstan man? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that was cool. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And so basically, to wrap up the movie, because after she comes back from India, that's really it.
Her
Like,
cousins die. Her cousin
yeah.
dies.
Yeah. Her cousin
They,
dies while she's in India. In the same way, her cousin was a sassy black woman on the phone. They end her life in a very similar way. She puts the phone down on her cousin's shoulder. And while she's in India, she says some very powerful words like, I will miss you, sister. I love you, sister. Cover me, sister. And I'm imagining like the sound on the speaker on the other end, like how these like words are ringing off like through like a 2-bit sound system, just echoing in like a hospice room. It was just very, very strange, like a very strange way. Like it was like the death of the sassy black character.
yeah, talking through a BlackBerry,
Talking to a
from
blackberry.
India.
Talking to a blackberry. The woman had a blackberry. Can we talk about that? The entire movie.
No, we can't.
We don't want to
Let's
talk
not
about that.
waste time on the BlackBerry.
Let's not waste time on the blackberry. Okay, no problem. Anyway, moving on. That's pretty much the end of like the story. Like she comes back to her home that she was going to sell, but she didn't end up selling it, and she has the whole house remade. She has like some like realization that this is her home, and she needs to deal with the trauma and not run away from trauma. She writes her book and ties all the things together, and she puts down her arguments for why America has a caste. And this is where the movie might turn off some people from my perspective, because the number one thing she writes down for how America has a caste system and how caste is enforced is by endogamy, which is the idea that certain groups have to marry within their own group, and that's enforced usually by the dominant society. So they start showing images of like black men who were hanged, possibly because they were like sleeping with a white woman or something like that. Or they show like the Dalits like jumping into a big pole of shit, and then they show like the Jewish woman and the German guy having their baby taken by the Nazis, and then the woman is sent to like a concentration camp and stuff like that. And yeah, then she starts breaking down the other ideas. Yeah, there were so many things that were covered in that last final moments of
Yeah,
the
I
movie.
mean, there were pillars to her argument, and she
Hmm.
said there were like 7 or 8 pillars. And the first one was endogamy, and then there was like dehumanization. There was dirty, like purity versus like dirtiness,
Hmm.
and then inherited inferiority and inherited superiority.
Hmm.
So like she had different pillars of her argument, and she showed like different parts of history where those things were like portrayed in these
Hmm.
systems. And I just thought like for me, I thought like those last scenes where she was sort of reading us her book were really powerful because they had powerful imagery. They were like you said, the image of the Indian guy diving into the poop hole, and don't laugh, it was really bad. There was occupational hierarchy. Some people can't do certain jobs and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And yeah, there was like the slave ship, scenery, and the concentration camp scenery from like all the countries in history that she was talking about. And there was also like the story of the little boy Al, and yeah, like he was a black kid, and he was in a baseball team with all the other white kids, and basically after they won the game they all went to the pool, but he wasn't allowed to touch the water because he would make the water dirty. And that scene was really powerful as well.
Hmm.
So I really liked like the breakdown of her theory, honestly.
Right. I think the breakdown, how it was shot and how she worded it, it made it sound better than what it is. Because I feel like what she was doing was listing a bunch of atrocities, tragedies, negative things that have happened to people, but that's not tying together why we should now call our system in America a caste or viewing it through that lens. Because she also says in that whole breakdown that race is not a part of the caste system, or race is not needed to support the caste system. But I would argue that race is the exact byproduct of the caste system and the justification for America's caste system. You can't, no pun intended, you can't cast that aside to say that this is why caste exists in America. You get what I'm saying? And I think opening it up with endogamy and saying that rigid sexual control of people is one of the ways that caste is enforced might turn some people off to this movie, because at the beginning we see this woman, this black woman, with a white man, and this might make people think that this woman really is trying to fight racism and white supremacy by spreading her legs or encouraging interracial sex, like as if that's going to be the way we're going to get liberation. Sorry if I might be going too deep into this, but this is really how I'm interpreting that. Because if you're saying that we need to break down these barriers, and then you start bringing up, examples of like the Jewish girl with the German guy, and you yourself are living an example of this sort of interracial relationship that goes against the norms of the dominant society. I think what you're trying to say, or the message people might get, is that yeah, racism will be finished once we all just start fucking each other. Well, we've been fucking each other, and we've been fucked the entire time. So this is one of the things that really bothered me about that. Like the first thing you can think of after traveling to India and Germany, and nobody was talking about sex, is that you got to bring up endogamy. Do you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, Simon, but she's not saying let's just all fuck each other. She's saying that you should have the freedom to be with whoever the fuck you want. And if the society is limiting you from doing that, then that puts people in a certain mindset. And that's like, the humans are social beings, and we socialize with each other for survival. And one of the biggest socialization that we do is mating. So she's saying if that is restricted, then that creates a whole bunch of other situations for discrimination and for class differences, for caste systems and things like that. Of course, she's not saying let's all fuck each other. And
If
she fell in love with a person who is white, and she didn't write the story like before they were married. Like they were married long years ago. So yeah, like I don't get that idea, and I know that's not your specific idea, or I don't know, is it?
No, it's not my
Okay.
specific idea,
But
but
yeah, like but for me that's his explanation, and everything she basically said, and that was like also her closing sentence, I guess, if I remember correctly. And she was like, whatever we want to do as humans, like we should be able to do it freely, unless of course like it's not hurting anybody and stuff like that. And that was like her whole argument
hold
when
on,
it
wait.
comes to like mating and endogamy. And that was just the first pillar of like making a caste society.
Hold on, wait. I just realized a lot of the times I say crazy stuff, and then I say, but that's not what I think, though. So let me not be pussy. Yeah, that is what I think. I think that if you were to talk to some black scholar or somebody who is very intellectual about any issue, and then you ask them, okay, what's the one way to fix it? And then they start talking about interracial sex. You'd be like, what the fuck, bro? What is wrong with you? You get what I'm saying? Like the first thing out of her mouth to talk about this whole thing was something that was not related to any of her research. Nobody in India was talking about, yeah, one of the problems is the Dalits can't marry the Brahmins. Or when she went to Germany, that people were talking about, yeah, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened if the Jews had been able to clap some German cheeks. Like nobody brought that up. But she had to start bringing up endogamy, like out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. That was not a part of her research.
Once again, she was not coming up with a solution. She was explaining the system. So her solution is not everybody fucking each other. Okay, she's coming up with a framework of this system
How
that
is
discriminates other people.
how is that not the presumed solution? If you talk about why we have this bad thing, and one of the bad things is this that supports the super bad superstructure, how can not that also be inferred?
That would be the not the solution, but that would be the outcome if there was a solution to this like problem of discrimination and racism or caste system, whatever she's talking about. That would be the outcome. If we didn't have any racism in the world, any caste systems around the world, then people would be able to fuck whoever the fuck they want. Does that make sense? That would be the outcome. Like, and once again, like she's going through pillars, and that's the first step in creating a casted society, a separated society. So I feel like you have to start from her last pillar. Like, first you have to, solve the issue of purity and dirtiness, and then, humanizing people, and then like inferiority, superiority, and then last, that will be the outcome that people will be able to free to love who they want. Those are the outcomes that would like, come from solving the caste system, but they are not the solutions. Like just saying let's not have endogamy is not a solution. It's an outcome.
Okay, you're saying that's an outcome, not a part of the solution.
If
So
we were to fix the problem, yes.
endogamy could still exist without a caste system, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then endogamy is then not important to talking about the caste system. It's not important. If it could still exist outside of the caste system, then it's not important at all.
No, it's a step. Like how I don't know, like for Nazi Germany or for Stalin and stuff like that, they talk about propaganda that they did to influence people, and her pillars are like those. These are propagandas that are made by the white supremacists. So yeah, they become like the propagandas. They can't exist without the caste system, but they are tools used to enforce the caste system.
Mhm.
Does that make
I,
sense?
I got you. I got you. I got you. Listen, I'm just saying that I feel like she said a whole lot of nothing and just told a lot of anecdotes and stories and brought up the trauma to sort of just say the same thing that black scholars have been saying for a long time, that our struggle that we're going through in the US fighting white supremacy and dealing with this is very relative and relational to other people's fights against their forms of discrimination. And what I think is she's trying to relabel it because so many people have bastardized the word racism and it's sort of played out. And she's doing a great thing that black people have been doing for years, which is inventing new words to explain our ideas because white people take them and run it into the ground. Earlier, you said in this live stream you don't like the word woke because woke now means, something very negative or tacky or insincere. But that's the thing. Like, we have to continue. Woke is not the first word. Before there was woke, there was conscious. Before it was conscious, it was down. Before it was down, it was you had soul and all that sort of stuff. We have to keep inventing words to pass on these ideas. But one of the things that black people have failed at, we have only failed at not creating a new word for racism and letting racism be bastardized. Because nowadays people say, I'm tired of all this racism I face as an Italian in Germany. Right? So we have to now, look for outside ways of expressing this. And in English, we do have other words to talk about, different forms of discrimination, such as xenophobia, such as jingoism, such as nationalism. But those don't really kick. Like, they don't really hit like calling somebody a racist. That will stop somebody in their tracks. You get what I'm saying? So my whole issue with how she put the book together and the ideas together is it feels like just a remix of our ideas already out there. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I don't agree with you. I think it's a bigger picture rather than a remix, honestly. And I just want to read the sentence on Wikipedia about
Mm-hmm.
the actual book and actual writer. So the book is called "Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents." And it says here, the book describes racism in the United States as an aspect of a caste system, a society-wide system of social stratification characterized by notions such as hierarchy, inclusion and exclusion, and purity. So this is how the book is described. So it's an aspect of the caste system. She sees racism as an aspect of the caste
Okay,
system.
I feel like that was not talked about in the movie because the word racism is abandoned after the first 20 minutes. Literally, we don't hear that word for the rest of the movie. And it just comes about caste, 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 rather than, racism is a part of the caste system in America, which also includes classism, sexism, homophobia, nationalism. You get what I'm saying? There wasn't that tying together of all of America's caste system. It seems like she was just creating this framework for understanding the caste system and superimposing the Indian caste system in its, over America's, way of doing things.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe the movie didn't do like a really good job on telling us the actual content of the book. Maybe there could be like room for misjudgments in the
Mm-hmm.
movie within the movie. I mean, I didn't read the book, but from
Mm-hmm.
what I'm reading on Wikipedia is that it is about like racism in the United States.
Right, right,
That's
right.
the core of the book, but there are just like different aspects that she exampled from India and Nazi Germany, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So overall, I'm gonna say, this movie was very interesting to watch. I would recommend somebody watch it. This is one of those great movies that uh, people who want to deal with the issues of our world in a sincere way, in an honest way, and really want to learn. Because there is no way anybody can watch this movie and not learn something that they didn't know before. Which I value this movie for. Really do value it because sometimes you can watch a movie and they just run over the same historical facts or memories that people have. But you'll learn something about India if you didn't know. You'll learn something about Germany if you didn't know. You'll learn something about Black Americans that you didn't know watching this movie. So I value it for its knowledge and its insight. I like the gentleness that they deal with, Trayvon Martin's death and how he is represented throughout the movie, and also highlighting these Black scholars who are unknown, like the two Black people who went down into the South and did that research. So yeah, there's a lot to cherish about this movie. It's just her premise on how she's doing it, I feel like, is problematic to some degree. But it is a tearjerker, so don't watch this movie if you don't want to cry, because some of the scenes really might pull at you. They might, one scene will get you. There's a bunch in here that are just going to jump at you. They're not jump scares, but they're jump cares. Jump cares. They'll make you cry. There's one of them.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I would recommend this movie as well. It's like educational. It's interesting in a way that there's travel in it and you get to see like other countries and their cultures. So if you're interested in like those type of things, I think this movie would be something that you like if you're interested in societies and these systems. But I think like even if you're not interested in it, I think it's like an inspirational movie overall. It's not like the best ever production or best ever cinematography, but I think it's like still quality. Acting is good overall, even though there are like some, plot hole, funny like scenes and acts.
Mhm.
But that just makes it like sort of funny at some points, and not like it's not like a bad taste.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But yeah, and I don't know, like now I'm kind of curious and I want to read this book.
All right. Well, I suggest it, and there's probably a lot to learn in it, and she probably goes into deeper detail, and possibly there will probably be a lot in the book that I would agree with too. But the way the movie deals with certain things and says certain things, it's kind of confusing and frustrating to some degree.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I give this movie a solid 8. It's an 8, like no more, no less. 8 for me.
Okay, so this movie is better than Poor Things.
Yeah, definitely, because I learned something here. And Poor Things, I was just, kind of like bemused by Poor Things, in my opinion.
What is bemused?
Bemused is like wondrous, but also confused at the same time. It's a real word.
Okay, well, I'm gonna give this movie and 7.
A 7. Okay, why?
I mean, like I said, it's not like the best cinematography or production ever, but I don't think that was the goal of this movie. Um, there were some plot holes in it, and yeah, I mean, it did feel like a bit of a long movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, like those reasons, it was like a bit more like a documentary-ish, educational-ish. So yeah, that's that. Not that that's a bad thing, but for me,
Mm-hmm.
like in my rating system, I'm gonna give it a 7.
Okay, all right, all right. All right, well, this has been episode 28 of Simon and Acne Movie Reviews. This was Origin. Send your recommendations, send them in the chat. We're trying to cover all the movies. Look out for the next review, which might be The Color Purple, the musical that was made in 2023. We got some other hot stuff lined up for y'all as well. Stay tuned, and peace.